Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
The Pittsburgh Steelers were the busiest on trade deadline day, but how much did it really move the needle? Also, the Commanders made the biggest splash, and the Cowboys made the worst trade of the day.
I'm Peter Bukowski, starting your day with the can't-miss stories and biggest debates in sports. You're Locked On Sports Today.
Searching all major sports. Found.
Let's start with the biggest story.
The NFL trade deadline will never be the NBA or Major League Baseball trade deadline, but we did get some big names moving on Tuesday. The Pittsburgh Steelers grabbed a couple of them. Mike Williams from the New York Jets, now headed to the Steel City, and Preston Smith from the Green Bay Packers, now headed to Mike Tomlin and company. Christopher Carter from Locked On Steelers joins us now. And Chris, these are guys who are probably at this point in their careers bigger names than they are impact players on the field. But the Steelers are in a good position to compete right now in the AFC. So what do you think they are getting in this pair of players?
They're getting depth, and that's what they were kind of looking for in this process. Sure, a lot of Steelers fans wanted a star number 2 wide receiver to come their way, to be a 1-2 pair with George Pickens. And Mike Williams isn't exactly that. He's not Darius Slayton. He's not DK Metcalf or Cooper Kupp or any of the people Steelers fans were hoping for. But what Mike Williams does bring is a 6'4" guy that can line up on the outside and be another option in the Steelers receiving game that they don't currently have. Van Jefferson's more of a strong slot guy. Calvin Austin more of a fast slot guy. But they didn't have that other guy that can line up on the outside and be like, hey, this guy can win a jump ball and out physical a cornerback in a situation. Now, again, Mike Williams ain't going to move the needle a ton for the Steelers offense. It's not like he's going to take over games, but he gives Russell Wilson another option in this offense to get the ball to if left in single coverage. And you're seeing what Russell Wilson's doing with guys like Van Jefferson, getting him the ball in 35-yard, patterns out deep down the sideline. And I think Mike Williams is another guy that gives you more depth at that position. The same thing as Preston Smith, a guy that you've covered for some years. Sure. He's not going to come in and be asked to start over TJ Watt or Alex Highsmith. He probably won't even get snaps over Nick Herbig, who's played very well if he's healthy. But what he will be is the 4th rotational edge guy that can float around a little bit. And Mike Tomlin, it's kind of crazy. Like literally a half hour before they traded for him. Well, they traded for Mike Williams, and then eventually they would later trade for Preston Smith. During Mike Tomlin's press conference, he mentioned, hey, like when Alex Highsmith and Nick Herbig were hurt, and it was just TJ Watt and practice squad guys, they were limited in what they could call in their blitz packages. Yeah. And so now Highsmith healthy, they're hoping Nick Herbig can be healthy. He was said to be practicing this week. And now with Preston Smith, you have 4 guys that you think you can confidently do and that aren't practice squad level guys, but active NFL solid veterans that can get after the quarterback.
Yeah, and I don't know that Mike Williams was a perfect fit with Aaron Rodgers, but for Russell Wilson, who will just say, "Hey, I'm gonna throw it up to you on the sidelines, and please go get it."
Yep,
that's what Mike Williams has done his entire career. He's never been I'm gonna run this 3-step slant perfectly in rhythm with the timing and which is what Aaron Rodgers wants, of course. He is the ball winner extraordinaire on the outside, even at, let's say, a reduced capacity from his prime. This seems like a very good fit for Russell Wilson, which is to say Mike Williams might have more value to the Pittsburgh Steelers than he would have for most other teams.
I agree with that assessment. I mean, if you look at yards per attempt right now in the NFL, Russell Wilson's near the top in all the lists on play action or on regular passing. It's because he's throwing the deep ball. And that's what the Steelers really wanted. And they're not going to ask him to do it 12 times a game. They're going to ask him to do it like 3 to 5 times a game. And it's going to be at timely spots that balance the run and catch a defense unawares. And they need guys like Calvin Austin who can get behind defenses, George Pickens who can win jump balls. But now they have a second guy who could go up there and win the jump ball while running down the sideline. And he's 6'4". He could go up and get it. We've seen that. That's what they really need. And Mike Williams, if he comes in and he gets 3 to 4 touchdowns in the second half of the season, that's a win for the Steelers. That's what they're not asking him to be a superstar. Just come in, make the occasional deep ball threat play, and let this and be part of a balanced offensive attack. So I agree with your assessment there. And similarly for Preston Smith on the defensive front, they're not asking Preston Smith to come in and dominate. One thing I think that he in the limited tape that I've been able to study, he does help against the run, and he can give another viable help there on the edge, being a stronger guy. And he's a bigger edge guy too. That's why when I looked at his measurements, I like DM'd you like, hey, can you send me a breakdown of like, can he play more 3-4 DN, or is he more purely edge rusher? And a big edge rusher is a great compliment to Nick Herbig, who's very small and quick. So now you have Alex Highsmith and TJ Watt, and now you have a quick guy and a strong guy to sub in for them. And now the Steelers can get a lot more creative with what they want to do up front, just like they can get more creative with what they're doing in the passing game.
Stay up to date all year on the Pittsburgh Steelers by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Steelers on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Thanks for making Locked On Sports Today your first listen. Coming up, the Commanders are going in on the Jaden Daniels era right now. Before we get to that, the trade deadline had a few big moves in the NFL to point out. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. And that winning $5 bet could be on an NBA matchup. Tonight, the Sixers head west to face the Clippers, and the spread is teeny tiny. FanDuel has the Clippers favored by just 1.5. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. And make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Trade deadline day began with a trade by the Bengals. No, really, the Bengals actually made a trade deadline acquisition to supplement the loss of Zach Moss, who will miss the rest of the season with a neck injury.
You're talking about a guy that has clearly proven himself in the league, averaging 4.8 yards per carry throughout his career. Just got lost in the shuffle this year in Chicago. They obviously went out and paid a running back in free agency, and he 8 carries total. So 1, he's fresh, but 2, he's proven it 3 straight years. I mean, he's been a piece of that Bears offense. He can catch passes out of the backfield, and he's going to be a free agent this offseason. And this is the final point here, because when you talk about giving up draft assets, well, that's fine. You give up a 7th round pick to get him, and you have him for the rest of this season. But then when he goes and signs elsewhere, he's probably going to help your compensatory pick formula. And that element of it is a factor. And that's why these late round picks for players that are proven, like a Khalil Herbert, someone that should be a good fit in this offense, I think. And be a good complement to Chase Brown. And if you need him to run it 15 times in a given week, I think he can do that. And I like this trade a lot. And I was pleasantly surprised this morning. I think it was before 8 a.m. or right around then, maybe 8:30 in the morning or so, Eastern time, when that news broke.
The Ravens traded for Tre'Davious White, but he's not a pass rusher.
Right after deadline day. So we're about 20 minutes past the deadline. And the Ravens did not acquire a pass rusher. They did not. Their move was Tre'Davious White today. The cornerback from the Los Angeles Rams comes over to the Ravens. But that's not what the need was. The secondary hasn't been wonderful this season, but I think everybody who's watched this Ravens defense understands the fall off that this pass rush has had, and the fact that getting a pass rusher was an absolute must. And I waited for a little bit to actually hit the go live button here, because usually there are a deal or two that sometimes trickle in once you actually hit that 4 o'clock window. And, actually, if there's something that hits while we're recording this, I'll stop this entire stream. We'll set it up and we'll go again and we'll celebrate a pass rusher. But, 20 minutes in, it does not, or after the fact, I guess, it does not look like that is happening.
And the Chiefs were not active, but they're confident they had the best trade deadline.
I would theorize and summarize to you that this is enough. Would you have liked to have a couple more pieces? Sure, but this is enough to see your path through to another return to the Super Bowl and fighting for that next championship. Do you agree, or do you think that there was a missed opportunity here?
I mean, when I look at the competition and what the other teams did, especially in the AFC, it seems like the AFC teams were a lot more active than maybe on the NFC side. But you look, the Steelers get Mike Williams at the deadline. The Ravens made a handful of moves throughout the process. I'm not sure that, honestly, any of these teams improve themselves as much as the Chiefs did. I mean, and some of that is because I'm putting a lot of weight on this DeAndre Hopkins deal, because I've seen enough through 2 weeks that, I mean, that was the best acquisition that any team made.
The Washington Commanders are ready to see what Jaden Daniels can do in a postseason race. They trade for Marshawn Lattimore. They give up big-time draft capital to do it, a third, a fourth, and a sixth to get Marshawn Lattimore, and then you get the fifth-round pick going the other way. David Harrison from Locked On Commanders joins me now. And David, this is a Dan Quinn defense. They want to play some man coverage. They get a man coverage corner, but to me, this speaks to more about where they think they are right now in this NFC.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's exactly what this is about. And all through this season, obviously they start off 1-1, barely beat the New York Giants with the 7 field goals, and everybody's just kind of happy to see the potential in Jaden and all that stuff. But then from that point forward, like, you have a really good, well-contested game against the Baltimore Ravens, beat the Cincinnati Bengals on Monday night, and you do all this other good stuff. And the battle between Jaden and Caleb goes Washington's way on the Hail Mary, and just starts to kind of feel like this is a team that maybe isn't in rebuilding mode as much as it is a built team that now needs to start looking forward towards being a competitor. And this is the kind of move you make when you're that kind of a team, and you got to give a big hat tip to Adam Peters, because the third round, he's got 2 third-round picks because of a previous trade he made in the preseason. So that's one of the picks there. The 6th-round pick is actually the pick that the Saints sent to Washington to begin with for John Ridgeway, the defensive lineman. They just send that one back to them. And then the 4th-round pick is organically theirs, but then they get a 5th-round pick, which they lost a 5th-round pick in that trade that sent Jahan Dotson to the Eagles. So Adam Peters, like, while he's maneuvering all these chess pieces, really is coming out on top and making profit while he's telling other people he's breaking even. And it's just a masterful way of constructing a roster and orchestrating these trades. And I think it's really impressive considering he's a first-year GM. And I think, honestly, like, if you're looking at now the John Lynch executive tree, right? Like, I think Adam Peters is a really impressive branch off of that, halfway through his first season.
David, how much do you think the division, the schedule has to do with this? Because now they're going to get the Cowboys without Dak Prescott. The Cowboys might not have been that big a test. Anyway, they get the Cowboys twice down the stretch. Saints, who are a complete mess. They just fired Dennis Allen. They've got the Titans. Of course, they also have the Eagles twice in all this. But this all sets up for them to be like an 11-win team right now, the way that this is looking. How much do you think that had to play into all this, where whether they're ready or not, this is like ready or not, here we come, because here they come. They're going to have an opportunity to be in the postseason here.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it, right? And because going along with the wins, and it kind of goes back to preseason conversations I had on Locked On Commanders, where we talked about how this team could beat the FanDuel 6.5 over/under wins they had listed for them in the preseason. Because that's step number 1.
Wins already. It's already done. They won.
Exactly. How do you get to 7 wins? Once you get to 7 wins, how do you potentially win the NFC East? And look, just being honest with the situation, as it stood before us, you had to kind of acknowledge you need a little bit of a collapse from the Philadelphia Eagles. You need a little bit of a collapse from the Dallas Cowboys to make the Washington Commanders a preseason, to have any realistic conversation with the Washington Commanders winning the NFC East division. You had to kind of have those two things. The Philadelphia Eagles certainly have gotten back to winning, but again, it's winning in spite of their head coach. And when you're having to win in spite of your head coach, there's always that threat that he's going to cost you in a really big game. That really big game could be not this Thursday night, but next Thursday night against the Washington Commanders, right? That could very well be the game. You see Nick Sirianni's mistakes rear its ugly head. And then Dallas Cowboys have collapsed in a way that I don't think any of us even saw coming. Even those of us who said the Dallas Cowboys are primed for a collapse, I don't know that we all saw this coming. Like you just mentioned, with Dak Prescott going on IR, CD's banged up, Micah's still not fully back. Like, this thing is just a mess rolling into a bigger mess. And so when you look at not just the success you've had as a team, but then you look at what's going on around you in the division, right? The first step to winning a championship is always trying to win your division first. And you look at where your weaknesses on your team. Offensive line has been much better than expected. Running game has been as expected. Jaden Daniels has been lights out. Receiving core has been better. Secondary has been okay in the back end. Safeties, linebackers have been good. D-line has been okay. Pass rush is getting better. Your weakness is your cornerbacks. So that's exactly where Adam Peters goes out and sends a heat-seeking missile, outbidding the likes of the Baltimore Ravens, potentially the Kansas City Chiefs, potentially, and going out there and making, I mean, look, big boy moves. Like that's what Adam Peters is making here in the midway point of the season.
What do you think the chances are that this is a potential long-term play for the Washington Commanders? I mean, there are multiple years left on this deal for Marshawn Lattimore at big time numbers, though. I mean, it's going to cost $18+ million to carry him the next couple of years. Is this an audition and we'll see, or do you think this move was made with the idea that, hey, we've got Jaden Daniels, Marshawn Lattimore is still a young player, he could be part of our core moving forward, which is why we're willing to give up all of this draft capital?
Yeah, I think you're willing to give up that capital to find out if he's going to be a part of your core, right? I don't think anybody comes into this team just automatically getting your spot as a core member of this roster outside of Bobby Wagner, who's a Hall of Famer wearing pads, right? And even Jaden Daniels, to go back to him having to earn his starting job. I mean, Peter, we were all in rookie minicamp, mandatory minicamp OTAs, and before we even hit training camp, we're all like, Jaden's the best quarterback on this roster. I don't know what they're waiting for, but they still made him go out there and have to earn every single thing he got. So when you look at Marshawn Lattimore, like, yeah, dude, you're coming in expected to be the piece that's going to really elevate this secondary, but nobody's going to pay you for what we think you're going to do. You're still going to have to come in here and you're still going to have to do it because all that money that's coming up 25, 2026, none of it's guaranteed. So if this doesn't work out and Adam Peters and Dan Quinn look back and say, all right, we swung and we missed, it happens, it's okay, they can get out of that in a heartbeat. You know what I mean? It would be painful, a PR mess, sure. All those things, but you can still do it and keep control of your team. But if Marshawn comes in and shows that he can be a piece to build around, then you go ahead, you do that. Maybe you turn those 2 years of non-guaranteed money into an extension and more guaranteed money, because what player doesn't want guarantees? And you work it out that way to where maybe Marshawn goes under contract till he's into his 30s and all that stuff. And now you've got a lockdown corner when he's healthy in the NFL. You got Benjamin St-Juste on the opposite side, who's shown some growth this year. Maybe he shows enough to get returned in the offseason. And you can still invest draft capital in your perimeter cornerbacks to continue to grow guys behind Marshawn. Because, again, cornerback, you know this, Peter, one of the toughest positions to transition to the NFL from college. Having a guy like Marshawn in place allows you to spend capital, mold a young guy behind him. Maybe Emmanuel Forbes continues to grow behind the scenes, right? We'll see. But you have the opportunities now to do this. And again, if it doesn't work out, you can get out of it easily.
Stay up to date on the Washington Commanders all year long by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Commanders on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Coming up, the Cowboys made the worst trade of deadline day. Guys, ever feel like you need a little boost in the bedroom? It's time you stop worrying about your performance and get Hims, so you can feel confident knowing you can deal with whatever comes your way. Like a quarterback facing the blitz, you know you have the answers with Hims. Hims is changing men's healthcare by providing you with access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your couch. Hims provides access to a range of doctor-trusted ED treatments like chewable hard mints and Viagra and Cialis in their generics for up to 95% cheaper. The process is 100% online, so there's no need for uncomfortable doctor visits. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/lockedon. That's HIMS.com/lockedon for your personalized ED treatment options. HIMS.com/lockedon. The products mentioned are chewable compounded products which are not approved by or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription is required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan. We just had this discussion with Locked On Cowboys, but their team is hurt. Like pretty much everyone. It's been a rough season up to this point, and Dak Prescott was just put on IR. So why on earth did they trade away a draft pick for any player, much less a player who the worst team in the league didn't even want? The madman Tyler Rowland explained why the Cowboys made the worst deadline trade on a recent Locked On NFL.
Another team that I don't really see differently, but I didn't see them very well in the first place, is the Dallas Cowboys, who make probably the worst trade of the day. I haven't seen one single person give a positive spin on the move. They trade for Jonathan Mingo, who is in his second year. He's been a bust for the Carolina Panthers. And listen, he didn't do anything at Ole Miss either. So it's just a player that's never put up any sort of production, who people are like, this is perplexing. What a great move by Carolina to ship this dude off for a 4th-round pick. I mean, you know,
got rid of Deontay Johnson too.
I know. I mean, he got more than Deontay Johnson. It's just absolutely crazy. The Cowboys paid more for Jonathan Mingo than they got when they traded Amari Cooper to the Browns. Now, I know the salary cap and, the contract was part of that as well, but this is just an absolute head scratcher, especially with Dak Prescott going on IR, which was announced earlier in the morning. Like, I have no way to rationalize this. I feel so bad for Cowboys fans.
This is what happens when owners get involved. As someone who covers the Green Bay Packers, I see the exact opposite. And I hear from fans all the time. If the Packers had an owner, they would show more urgency in trying to win. The complaints are that the Packers are not committed to winning. They like the playoff revenue. And if there's butts in seats, they don't care. My counter is always look around pro sports. Show me the places where the owner, when they meddle in these sorts of decisions, show me where they help. This was a trade that was roundly mocked across the media sphere, across social media, everywhere. The 39th overall pick a year later gets traded. That doesn't happen, first of all. And the only reason it happens is because he can't play. He can't even get on the field for the worst team, or arguably the worst team, one of the three worst teams, certainly in the NFL. But the Dallas Cowboys, led by Jerry Jones, who does not feel like he has many years left at the helm in Dallas, is pushing for this. So he says, let's go out and overpay for a guy we liked in the draft, even though in the NFL, he's nothing. This is what happens more often than not when owners get involved. They are rarely benevolent actors who just wave a magic wand and fix all of the problems of their team. More often, they do stuff like this. And finally, leadership can be conveyed through facial expressions, some are saying. Well, some is one, and the one is Joe Burrow. Clips have gone viral of him sitting on the bench and looking absolutely dreadful after throwing his 5th touchdown and leading his team to a 41-point day. When asked about it, Burrow said, well, maybe I could not let my emotions show quite as much, but it's also something that I've tried to do more. And I know people in the locker room have wanted me to do a little more, whether bad or good. He's been the sole reason the Bengals have won any games this year. So maybe he has a point. Maybe listen. If you're catching this episode after hearing your favorite Locked On show, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. Also, if you're a new subscriber to Locked On Sports Today, we're here for you with the biggest stories in sports every day. Coming up on the next Locked On Sports Today, which team is best positioned for a Super Bowl run after the NFL trade deadline? So at least until tomorrow, stay locked on sports today.
Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
Go to our video on demand. Click on sports at the top of your screen. There, you'll find past episodes of Locked On Sports Today, plus other Locked On shows on demand.